I think we are definitely nearing the end stages. This whole thing has, I think, exposed what really drives the market.
The Federal Reserve is about to blow up the price of crypto, at least according to popular YouTuber and analyst Virtual Bacon.
Looking at the past times during the beginning of the rate cut cycles, I think the bull run will at least...
He shares some wild market predictions in this video.
If we see, I'll start to take large portions off the table.
Smash the like button. If you hold Bitcoin, this is one interview that you need to see. Now, let me introduce our guest. Virtual Bacon, Dennis, you have blown up on crypto YouTube this year with your great analysis, accurate price calls, top altcoins, general macro outlook. When you speak, people listen. So before we get into some of the really juicy stuff, and make sure you watch today's whole interview, what's your take, your analysis on the crypto market so far this year?
Well, first of all, you gave me way too much credit. I really just try my best to analyze the market and give people my thoughts. So I think people are obviously everyone and people on crypto Twitter are extreme fear now. I think most people have been just too tired of the market over the past 6 months with the chop, and people are starting to lose hope. But I really do feel like this is the time to dial back in and take back the enthusiasm, the excitement we had in Q1 of this year and apply that now. I think that's the best strategy.
Speaking of Q1, it kind of everything got exciting earlier than usual, maybe with the BlackRock, Bitcoin ETF news and everything like that, plus the halving, plus everything. Is this cycle playing out like previous cycles, or how do you think about it?
Yeah, so obviously this cycle is heavily driven by institutions now with ETFs, with BlackRock, and especially with what we just seen with rate hikes, rate pause, and now potentially rate cuts. This whole thing has, I think, exposed what really drives the market, which is the macro liquidity. And I went back to the drawing board to look at why the cycles have been so different, 2017, 2021, and 2024. And I think what was really telling was that in the 2017 market, when we had an extended bull run lasting over a year, it was heavily correlated with the M2 global money supply growth. Throughout that period, that chart has just gone up only. And right around the time it topped, it was like February 2018 when Bitcoin topped. When you translate that to 2021 COVID cycle, it was kind of applied as well, and top was around the same time. So I think those cycles are much more obvious, not as obvious, but much more accurate. It just so happened that they tend to correlate with the Bitcoin halving. But this time, that kind of explains why we're seeing a delayed cycle where we have the halving year, but people expected the bull run to start a lot sooner. But I think it's starting a bit more delayed. Q1 2025, Q4 this year is kind of where we're seeing the true price action starting.
Interesting. So yeah, most people think of, in the past 14 years of Bitcoin, most people think of, the cycles revolving around the halving. And certainly, it does seem like that's happened in past years, but you're saying it's more of the M2 macro money supply.
Yeah, they kind of correlate. I'm not saying like halving cycles don't play an effect. Obviously, Bitcoin gets more and more scarce. And I think especially on the halving year, we see a lot more trading volume, a lot more liquidity. And whatever type of events that are supposed to happen, like ETF speculation, et cetera, they will try to frame it around the Bitcoin halving time as well. So they have something to talk about. But I think the 4-year cycle is a bit more stretched if you all hinge it on one event happening every 4 years. I think the halving year having volatility and high volume is true, but the subsequent years after is more driven by other liquidity.
So let's talk more about, you said Q4, you're bullish, 2025, you're bullish. Take us through your thoughts on what happens within this next quarter and the next year. From a macro point of view, kind of big picture, what's your outlook?
Yeah, so Q4 this year, starting from September FOMC, hopefully Fed has cut rates and they have kept their words to the pivot. And according to CME Fed Watch, which has been very accurate, we are seeing the next 9 FOMC meetings having at least 9 rate cuts. And we're potentially seeing one double cut somewhere next year. So the rate cut cycles, like once they start, they keep going. They don't just randomly revert, and it goes kind of one direction only. So with that being said, the only question now left is this going to be immediately bullish effect, or will the kind of recession fear still set in and we have a non-ideal landing, like a hard landing versus a soft landing? That I don't think anyone can really predict. Not even the Fed themselves know. What I do know is with the revised job numbers, we have been in a recession for at least a year. It's just not classified that way from the agencies. And I think we are definitely nearing the end stages. And looking at the past times that during the beginning of the rate cut cycles, it can take a maximum of 6 months before the S&P turns around. And about half the times when it's really bad around the recession time, 3 months and 6 months mark, the S&P was still kind of choppy. At the other half of the times, even the 3 mark already, S&P was trending up only. So I think that's kind of a toss up, whether we will see very easy time starting in Q1 next year or right away in October. But what I do know is come March of next year, I just don't see how the market can keep bleeding like this.
With that, do you think that Bitcoin tops out somewhere near the end of next year, or how do you think about that? And then ultimately, what is your Bitcoin price prediction for 2025?
I guess I'll start with the prediction. I have always held this kind of relatively like average number of around 200K for my personal portfolio. That wraps just around to 4 to 5 trillion-ish for Bitcoin market cap, total market cap just under 10 trillion. And I think that's fair. I think for sure we will reach 100K as long as things line up and as long as, S&P recovers nicely. Like 100K is a very easy number at this point. The question is like, when do we reach that? So far, it looks like the rate cut cycle will at least last till Q4 2025. And even with all the projections that they have made, the Fed has already released their targets by the end of 2025 for rates, and they need so many FOMCs to get there. The only question is, will they keep cutting rates in 2026? And that kind of we don't know. So I think the bull run will at least last until end of 2025. That's why I'm taking it one step at a time. If we see, I want to give myself kind of conservative on both sides as well, time versus price. So if we see Bitcoin reaching 200K in 2025, I think that I'm happy with that. I'll start to take large portions off the table. But if we don't see that and we are kind of Q3-ish 2025, then we'll have to look at the drawing board again and figure out if liquidity injection is going to continue into 2026. Then we maybe wait a bit longer. So there's a time horizon and there's a price horizon both.
But you think 200K is possible in 2025 or near 2026?
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I think that's my average expected return.
Could be lower, could be higher.
Yeah.
Final thoughts, Virtual Bacon. What else can you impart on the Altcoin Daily audience? Yeah, final thoughts.
I think it just hang in there. Like even some of my audience, I've heard so many people just leaving the space and hang in there a couple more months, and I think we can pull through and do what you need to do, protect your psychology. Don't get mad on your bags. Just know that there are better days ahead.
I like that.